Imagine walking into a billion-dollar boardroom, extending your hand to greet a world-famous billionaire, and being told, "I don't shake hands with staff." Now here's the twist. The man he insulted wasn't staff at all. In fact, within just 5 minutes, that same nobody revealed he controlled a staggering $4 billion in global support. And what happened next flipped the entire room upside down, turning the arrogant billionaire into the biggest fool in the building. This is the shocking true story of the handshake that never happened, and how one act of arrogance cost a billionaire billions. "I don't shake hands with staff." Those 6 words dropped into the room like a hammer, cutting through the buzz of quiet chatter and the clicking of laptops. Everyone froze. For a split second, you could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the shuffle of expensive shoes on polished marble floors. Some people thought they had misheard. Others lowered their eyes, pretending to recheck their notes, while a few gave awkward chuckles that quickly died out. It wasn't just what was said. It was how it was said. Cold, sharp, final. The billionaire didn't even look at the man. He was rejecting, as if he wasn't worth the effort of eye contact. Instead, he waved his hand dismissively like a king brushing away a servant. The man standing in front of him, tall, neatly dressed in a modest navy suit, had extended his hand with calm confidence, expecting nothing more than the basic courtesy of a greeting. He didn't flinch when his gesture was rejected. His expression didn't crack. He simply let his hand fall back to his side, his lips curling into the smallest of smiles. That smile wasn't forced. It wasn't angry. It was the smile of someone who had seen arrogance before, someone who knew exactly how to handle it. But for the rest of the room, the atmosphere had shifted. The energy was no longer collaborative. It was tense, awkward, and uncomfortable. A woman in the corner nervously shuffled papers. 2 junior associates exchanged glances, silently asking the same question. Did he really just say that? One man coughed to break the silence, but it didn't help. See, in rooms like this, first impressions are everything. Deals worth millions, even billions, can rise or fall in the opening moments of a meeting. The billionaire thought he had made a power move, separating himself from the so-called staff. He thought this would reinforce his status, remind everyone that he was the most important person in the room. But in reality, he had just made a mistake so colossal that it would cost him more than money. It would cost him his reputation. The irony? The billionaire didn't even know who he was talking to. He assumed. He looked at the color of the man's skin, the simplicity of his suit, and the calmness of his demeanor, and decided, not important. He didn't ask for an introduction. He didn't even bother to check the guest list. And that's where arrogance blinds you. The man he refused to acknowledge didn't argue back. He didn't try to prove his worth in that moment. Instead, he simply replied with 2 calm words. "All right, then." No one in that room understood it yet, but those 2 words were the warning bell. Because in less than 5 minutes, that same staff member was about to reveal himself as the most powerful figure in the meeting, the one holding $4 billion in potential investment support. And when the truth came out, everyone would remember that one handshake that never happened. Who was this man who had just been brushed off like a janitor in the wrong room? His name was Marcus Reed. And while his name wasn't plastered across magazine covers or shouted from financial news anchors on TV, those who truly understood power in global markets knew exactly who he was. Marcus's story didn't begin in a boardroom, filled with glass walls and Armani suits. It began in a cramped apartment on the south side of Chicago. His mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, raised him and his 2 sisters on her own. Money was tight, but discipline wasn't. Marcus often said later in life, "My mom gave me the most valuable investment, principles." From a young age, Marcus stood out. While other kids wanted sneakers, Marcus wanted books. He was the kid who stayed late at the library, not because anyone forced him, but because he was fascinated by the way numbers told stories. By the time he was 15, he was reading stock market charts for fun, trying to predict movements like a game. Teachers described him as quiet, polite, and incredibly focused. But here's the thing. Marcus wasn't just book smart. He had something even rarer: emotional intelligence. He could read people as easily as he read numbers. He noticed body language, subtle changes in tone, the way someone shifted when they were nervous. That skill would later become his secret weapon in business. After earning scholarships, Marcus went on to study finance and, international relations at one of the top universities in the country. Unlike many of his classmates who chased jobs at big-name banks, Marcus took a different path. He traveled. He went to Africa, the Middle East, and South America. He wanted to understand not just money, but the movement of money and where it flowed, why it flowed, and how it connected people. And over time, he built relationships, not flashy, not shallow, but real connections with business leaders, community organizers, politicians, and investors who saw in him something rare: trustworthiness. By his early 40s, Marcus quietly managed a portfolio that most billionaires would envy. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he was often the most powerful. His network spanned continents. His decisions could redirect billions of dollars in investments. And yet he carried himself with humility. No designer watches, no entourage, no ego. Just a man with a notebook, a pen, and a sharp mind. So when Marcus walked into that boardroom and extended his hand, he wasn't asking for respect as staff. He was offering respect as an equal, as someone who believed every human interaction mattered, no matter the stakes. And that's why the billionaire's dismissal didn't sting Marcus the way it might have stung someone else. Marcus had seen arrogance before. He had seen men with money mistake it for power. What the billionaire didn't realize was that in dismissing Marcus, he wasn't dismissing staff. He was dismissing the man who held the keys to $4 billion in global support. The smile on Marcus's face after being rejected wasn't weakness. It was control. It was the confidence of a man who knew the room, didn't yet understand who he really was. But they were about to. The billionaire's presentation began like a Broadway performance. He strutted to the front of the boardroom, chest out, voice booming, every sentence dripping with self-congratulation. He clicked through slides filled with graphs pointing upward, projections that looked unstoppable, and phrases like record-breaking growth and unparalleled innovation. Every few minutes he would pause and look around the room, waiting for nods or applause, as if the investors sitting before him were an audience there to admire, not evaluate. Some smiled politely, others scribbled notes. But there was one person in the room who remained completely unreadable: Marcus Reed. From the billionaire's perspective, Marcus was invisible. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't even acknowledge his presence. To him, Marcus was still just staff, perhaps taking notes or managing the projector. What the billionaire didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't just observing his slides, he was observing him. The tone, the arrogance, the lack of humility. And Marcus was already making mental calculations that had nothing to do with profits and everything to do with character. Finally, the billionaire wrapped up his speech with a dramatic closing line. "Gentlemen and ladies, what you see here is the future. And if you're smart, you'll want to be part of it." The silence that followed wasn't the applause he expected. It was the silence of polite restraint and anticipation. Because now it was Marcus's turn. Marcus stood slowly. No flash, no theatrics, just calm composure. He adjusted his jacket, glanced briefly at the billionaire, and then turned to the group. His voice was steady, confident, and carried weight without needing to be loud. "First of all," Marcus began, "thank you for the presentation. For those who don't know me, allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Marcus Reed. I represent an international coalition of investors, leaders from Africa, the Middle East, and North America, who believe in building sustainable partnerships. Collectively, our investment portfolio sits at roughly $4 billion. The words hit the room like thunder. Heads snapped up. Pens froze mid-scribble. The temperature of the room shifted instantly. Marcus continued, completely unfazed by the stunned faces around him. "We don't measure value only in terms of profit margins or growth charts. We measure it in terms of integrity, vision, and how people treat one another. Business, after all, is not just about numbers. It's about respect." The billionaire's confident smirk dissolved. His posture stiffened. For the first time in the meeting, he wasn't in control. His earlier dismissal now hung in the air like a shadow everyone could see. Marcus didn't need to mention the handshake. He didn't need to point out the insult. Everyone in that room already remembered it. The contrast was glaring. A man worth billions had just been dismissed as staff. And 5 minutes later, he revealed he could move more money with a single phone call than the billionaire could, brag about in an hour-long presentation. The silence broke into murmurs. A few investors nodded, impressed. Some whispered to each other, But one thing was clear. The balance of power had shifted, and Marcus wasn't done yet. The billionaire's face told the whole story. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for support. But all he saw were investors leaning forward, suddenly far more interested in Marcus Reed than in him. Just minutes earlier, he had been the center of attention, commanding the stage, boasting about his empire, expecting admiration. Now he looked small, trapped in the very room he thought he controlled. He forced a laugh, thin and unconvincing. "Well," he said, trying to recover, "that's impressive, Marcus. I had no idea we'd have such a powerful guest today." But his words fell flat. Everyone could hear the strain in his voice, the nervousness in his tone. The arrogance that once filled the room had evaporated, replaced by the stench of desperation. Marcus, on the other hand, didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he walked slowly toward the front of the room, every step deliberate. He looked at the investors one by one, making eye contact, letting the silence stretch just enough to make his next words hit harder. "Business," Marcus began, "is not only about numbers. Numbers are easy. Anyone can show you a chart with arrows going up. But real business, the kind that lasts, is built on something deeper. Respect, trust. The way we treat people when no one's watching." The room was silent except for the faint buzz of the projector. The investors nodded, hanging on every word. Marcus wasn't giving a speech. He was delivering a lesson. He paused, then added, "When you walk into a room and dismiss people you don't know, when you decide someone is beneath you without even asking who they are, that's not strength. That's weakness. And weakness is not something we invest in." The billionaire swallowed hard. His face turned red. He opened his mouth as if to protest, but no sound came out. He knew Marcus wasn't just talking to the room, he was talking about him. And the worst part? Everyone knew it too. Some of the investors shifted in their seats, nodding in agreement. A few even shot disapproving looks at the billionaire. The message was clear. His credibility had been shattered, not by Marcus's anger, but by Marcus's composure. Then came the decisive moment. Marcus placed his hands lightly on the table, leaned forward, and spoke with quiet finality. "We are not here to chase the loudest voice. We are here to back the vision that respects people. We cannot and will not commit billions to arrogance." Those words were a hammer strike. The investors exchanged looks, their decisions already made. The billionaire's empire, at least in that room, had crumbled in real time. And Marcus? He didn't need to raise his hand, didn't need to remind anyone of the insult. His calm presence, his measured words, and his unshakable dignity had done all the work. In less than 5 minutes, the man dismissed as staff had stripped the billionaire of his power and claimed the respect of every single person in that room. When Marcus finished speaking, the room remained silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from earlier, but the heavy silence that comes when truth has been spoken and everyone feels it. The investors sat back in their chairs, some nodding slowly, others staring at Marcus with newfound respect. The billionaire, once so loud and commanding, now sat small and uneasy, shifting in his chair like a schoolboy caught lying in front of the class. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide his embarrassment. His wealth couldn't shield him from the reality of what had just happened. And Marcus? He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply gathered his notes, looked around the room and said, "Thank you for your time." That was it. No grand finale, no rubbing salt in the wound. He didn't need to. His presence had already done more damage than any insult ever could. The investors immediately knew what they wanted. They weren't going to put their billions into a man who treated people like dirt. Instead, they leaned toward Marcus, some quietly signaling their interest, others openly stating their support. The tide had shifted completely. The story of that meeting spread like wildfire through business circles, not because of the financial outcome, though $4 billion in redirected. Support was no small thing, but because of the lesson it carried. A single moment of arrogance had cost a billionaire everything he hoped to gain, while a single act of humility had elevated Marcus Reed into a legend. They called it the handshake that never happened. And in boardrooms, business schools, and leadership seminars, the story became a case study in what true power looks like. See, money can buy many things: cars, houses, private jets, even temporary influence. But money cannot buy respect. Respect has to be earned through the way you treat people, not just the people you think are important, but everyone. Because you never know who you're really speaking to. That billionaire thought he was rejecting staff. He thought a handshake was beneath him. But that single decision cost him the trust of every person in the room. And worse, it exposed him for what he really was: insecure, arrogant, and blind to the value of others. Marcus Reed, on the other hand, showed the opposite. He proved that true strength is quiet. True confidence doesn't need to brag. And true leadership isn't about how loudly you speak, but about how deeply you respect. By the end of the day, Marcus walked out of that boardroom not just with $4 billion in support pledged to his vision, but with something far greater: the respect of people who mattered. The billionaire? He was left behind. A cautionary tale told in hushed tones, the man who lost billions because he refused to shake one hand. And here's the lesson for all of us. Life is full of moments that seem small. A handshake, a greeting, a simple word of respect. But those small moments carry massive weight. They can open doors to unimaginable opportunities, or slam them shut forever. So the next time you meet someone, whether they're in a suit or in a uniform, whether they run a company or sweep its floors, remember this story. Because the way you treat people when you think no one is watching, that's who you really are. And in the end, that truth will always come out. So remember this: every person you meet could open a door you don't even know exists. Treat people with respect, because the smallest gesture can change the biggest outcome. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories that will inspire, shock, and motivate you. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think Marcus was right to pull back the billions, or should he have given the billionaire another chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.